Welcome to Nursiscope Incorporated, where nursing meets innovation. Welcome to Nursiscope Incorporated, where nursing meets innovation. Hi everyone, welcome to Nursiscope Career Bootcamp 1.0. So glad to have you around. Okay, so we have our esteemed speakers here. They are ready and I hope you are. Let's know where you are connecting from. On the chat box, you can tell us your name and where you are connecting from. You are welcome. This is the third week of the Career Bootcamp, and it's been a wonderful ride over the past 2 weeks plus. I know I have witnesses in the house, right? Okay, so let's hear where you are connecting from. Esther Adeshino, connecting all the way from Ogbomoso, Nigeria. Esther, you are welcome. Okay, Agbara Olua, all the way from Nigeria. You are also welcome. Yes, one of our participants is greeting Dr. Celine. We are so honored to have her in the room. Eminike Oyindamola, connecting all the way from Lagos, Nigeria. You are welcome, Oyindamola. Juliet from Bayelsa, Nigeria. You're welcome. Edebojo Ame, all the way from Ogun State, Nigeria. You are welcome. Ugo from Edmonton, Alberta. You are wonderfully welcome. We have our speakers joining all around the world. Kemi Arogundade from Ekiti State, Nigeria. You are welcome. It's going to be an awesome ride. This is the session we have been waiting for, and we are really excited that we are here today. Okay, let's know where you are connecting from. I'm seeing David from Ekiti State, Esther from Lagos, Nigeria. Thank you so much, everyone, for connecting. Now, I'd like you to subscribe to our YouTube channel if you have not. I will implore you to also like the stream. The more likes we get on the stream, the more people will be able to view the stream, and we can reach more people. And I'd like you to also help us share this live stream. You can share your WhatsApp status, share on Instagram. We are live on Facebook too, right? And it's going to be an awesome ride. I can see Oluwadamilola Ajayi from the UK. You're welcome. Dr. Rosalind is also joining us from the UK. And two of our speakers are joining from Canada. Okay. Ayobami from Lagos, Nigeria. You are welcome. Okay. Esther from Ijabode. You are most welcome. All right, we move on to introducing our first speaker, Dr. Rosaline Austin, and we are going to be playing um, an introductory video to welcome to this stream.
What if your nursing career could go beyond the bedside and actually shape the future of healthcare? At the Nursiscope Career Bootcamp, we're bringing you voices that are doing exactly that. Meet Dr. Rosaline Austin, an internationally recognized nurse researcher transforming how we think about nursing and research. She earned her PhD from the University of Southampton in the UK and went on to complete a successful postdoctoral research role in Norway at the University of Stavanger.
They designed, they did feasibility study on a remote patient monitoring application that is called eHealth at Hospital to Home. And it's specifically targeting two chronic illness groups, so heart failure as well as colorectal cancer. During that very tricky transition time. So you were in hospital and you're going home. And there's a lot of new things that you're going to have to do. It's a very vulnerable time for people. So this app was designed to better support them.
Because the future of healthcare needs nurses who don't just follow evidence, but create it. Through her podcast, Researcher Revealed, she opens up the world of research, sharing real journeys, real challenges, and real impact. And now, she's bringing that experience to you as a facilitator at the Nursiscope Career Bootcamp. If you're a nurse ready to grow, to explore new paths, and step into your full potential, this is your moment. Register now. Your career can be more. What if...
Wow. Let's welcome Dr. Rosaline Austin to this conversation. Hi, Dr. Rosaline, you're welcome.
Hello. Hello, everybody out there watching, listening, putting messages out there. Very excited to be here.
Awesome. Good to have you around, Dr. Rosaline. And I've been following your story, your research over the past years, and it's really been an exciting one and an inspiring one. Thank you so much for all you do, Dr. Rosaline. All right. So I'm going to be introducing our next speaker, Dr. Tosin Akintunde. So a video will be playing shortly to introduce Dr. Akintunde.
Let's be honest. For many nurses, research feels complicated. Statistics feels overwhelming. And manuscript writing? Something for other people, not you. But what if that's not true? What if the only thing standing between you and becoming confident in research is the right guidance? Meet Dr. Tosin Akintunde, a senior research and data analyst with the Ministry of Mental Health and Addiction in Alberta, Canada. He holds a PhD and MSc in sociology, with strong expertise in data analysis and research methods. He has conducted research on topics with global reach, from Nigeria to Germany, China, Tanzania, Canada, and Bangladesh. But beyond the titles, his work is grounded in real human issues: childhood trauma, violence, and psychosocial well-being, using data to tell stories that shape targeted interventions and drive meaningful, lasting change. At the Nursiscope Career Bootcamp, Dr. Akintunde will break things down for you, from data analysis to manuscript writing, giving you the tools to move from confusion to clarity. And in his live session, Understanding Research in Nursing and Building a Research Career, you'll learn how to turn knowledge into a clear path forward. You don't have to be afraid of research anymore. You just need the right mentor and the right environment. Register now. Your growth starts with one decision. Let's be honest. For many nurses, research...
Wow. Dr. Tosin, you're welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Damlari. It's a great moment, to be here to try to impact the next generation of researchers. Thank you so much. I don't know. I can't wait to go, Right.
Great. Good to know that, Dr. Tosin. And let's dive in. I know our participants are ready. They are welcoming you. We have Okoyemi welcoming you from Canada. We have Oyinkosola from Oyo State, Nigeria, and our participants are really excited. I can feel the energy in the room. Okay, so let's move on right into the questions our participants are ready, the speakers are ready, and we can just start. So my first question goes to Dr. Rosaline. I would like to know that if we had met you as a nursing student many years ago, would we have guessed that you would become a researcher? And when did that shift happen for you? I'd like you to walk us through your journey from undergraduate nursing to where you are today. And would like to also know what drew you into research.
Oh, thank you so much, Dr. Dami. Basically, the short version of a very long story is I actually went into nursing so I could do more research. So I kind of did things backwards. So I
Oh,
actually, when I started my nursing degree, I already had a master's in science and neuroscience
wow.
that I'd done at the University of Toronto.
Great.
And that had like instilled a love for research. But I was really frustrated with that research because I didn't have the clinical skills to actually do research higher up on an injury or illness chain. I was more focused on rehabilitation. And
Mm.
so I wanted to become an acute care practitioner. And then once I had those skills, then bring research back in. So 100%, if you would have met me as a nursing student, I would have been like, get me to research.
Oh, okay.
But then, so did my nursing degree at the University of Calgary in Alberta. And I did it as a, what was called an accelerated program. So you do a 4-year degree in 2, but I was able to do that because I'd already done a master's and other work and stuff as well.
Okay.
Um, then basically, I took, when I finished my nursing degree, I think it was about 5 years, 6 years, to one, move countries, and two, just practice as a nurse and like get some of that foundational skills under me. So I was working in an ITU, and then because I'd moved to England, I actually ended up becoming a research nurse. So not a nurse researcher, but a research nurse. So I was working on
Okay.
loads of different types of studies, from like massive worldwide pharmaceutical studies on medications that didn't even have a name yet, all the way through to small, like PhD level studies that aren't really small, but compared to a big global study.
Mm.
And yeah, just was working away. And then the opportunity came up for me to start my PhD. So signed up for that, and the rest is history.
Wow. 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 That's a great story. And it's really interesting to know that why some people came into nursing and then they came into research. By the way, you came into nursing to be a researcher. And I'm
Yeah.
really glad to hear that. As a follow-up question, you mentioned something I know some of our participants will be interested in knowing
Yeah.
more about, and that's the difference between a nurse researcher and a
Mm.
research nurse.
Okay, so very, very briefly, a research nurse. So they do exist in most places in the world, but they're not as prevalent in every country in the world. So a
Okay.
research nurse is a person whose job it is to make research happen in an acute or community setting. So
Okay.
it means that with your role as a nurse is to take a protocol that somebody has written somewhere in the world
Yeah.
and make sure that it's implemented in your own clinical pathways. So you're doing things like adapting protocols, you're recruiting, you're collecting
Mhm.
data, you're
Yeah.
doing, sometimes you're giving unlicensed drugs. You can also be doing tests that you wouldn't normally do as a nurse. So you have to develop quite a strong set of advanced autonomous clinical skills. So we were often running clinics all by ourselves. Like the doctors would come in and out periodically, but we would run the clinics. So
Yeah.
the job of a research nurse is to deliver the research, but a
Mm.
research nurse isn't often involved in the design of study, the data analysis, or the write-up, where a research nurse does those other three things. So they can design a study, they develop it, they get the funding for it, they make sure that the study happens, they collect that data, they analyze it, and then they write up about it. So it's confusing because it's just two words flipped around, but there's actually quite a big difference in the job.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that clarification. I know many of our participants are already noting the difference and distinction between the two. So let me move to Dr. Tosin and ask the next question. So, Dr. Akintunde, we got to meet actually in Hong Kong while I was doing my PhD at the Chinese University of Hong Kong. That was where we met. And again, I came to Canada and we met in Canada, and I did this postdoc at the Faculty of Nursing, University of Alberta, where I had my postdoc too. So it's been a bit of moving together for the past few years. And I can say, Dr. Tosin, your career is a truly global one, moving from China to Canada, and then you are working as a senior research and data analyst with the government of Alberta, Canada. So many people wonder whether researchers are born or made. So I'd like to know from your perspective, how did your own journey into research begin? Can you walk us through to know how you navigated this path to where you are today? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Damlari. I would like to say that researchers are made.
Okay.
You have to fight for it. You have to be diligent. You have to strive for it. My experience and my story is a very remarkable one. Sometimes when I think about my journey, I tend to get deep connection to where I started from and where I am right now and how much I had to sacrifice. I did demography and social statistics from Obafemi Awolowo University, Nigeria. And that should set me up into research ordinarily.
Yeah.
But I would like to tell you that it was just scratching the surface. That was not what I would actually use to get me to the point where I am right now, because that was scratching the surface. And I will tell you that after I finished my degree, I was confused. I had no idea what I should do next, and I spent unnecessary amount of time in Nigeria instead of pursuing my master's immediately afterwards. I spent time making money. And I got to a point where I looked at my paycheck and I was like, oh my God, I cannot make a living with this paycheck. And that was when I started to think about masters.
Okay.
Masters. And, it was not just so easy for you to get a research position with bachelor's in Nigeria. And I thought about it. How will I get my master's? And the people I started to speak with told me that you could get scholarship. So when I heard about scholarship, I was like, oh my God, I finished with a 2-1. But I had no idea that that is my ticket into applying into scholarship. Some people feel like they need to have a first class before they can get a scholarship. Some people don't even know that with a 2-2, you can also get a scholarship. So I started to speak with people, and someone told me that, why not start applying? Now, that's another story for another time, how to bring together your document and your qualifications to be more competitive to get that scholarship. At the end of the day, I met someone who mentored me and told me that you can get scholarship in China. I was like, oh my God, China is one place that most people don't think about. China. Today, when I think about how much I got in funding in China, it's almost 120,000 Canadian dollars. And I'm like, I got this. So I got a scholarship to go to China. And then when I got to China, it was different in terms of how they mentor you. Immediately you get to China, the first thing they talk about it is manuscript publication. For your master's degree, you must know how to publish in a top journal. If you do not have that skill set, it's so difficult for you to graduate. So I got to China, I was introduced to research, and I was confused because for my master's, I could not publish that paper, but my supervisor saw that I have the skills already. until they gave me to proceed to PhD after my master's because they believed in the work I was doing. So when I got the PhD, I was stuck. It's another thing for you to have a PhD admission, and then it's another thing for you to know what to do with that PhD and how
Yeah.
to start the research, how to do meaningful research that can contribute. So I was stuck. I met good people who mentored me. I would like to say that you need to climb on the shoulders of giants, and that is one of the best ways to get integrated into research, actually. So I met those people, and I would like to say that those giants that I climbed on their shoulders, they are from engineering and chemistry. So I'm in
Oh,
social sciences. You see, at the end of the day, they just triggered something in me. They showed me how. And when I had my first breakthrough in terms of publication, PhD became easy for me. That my supervisor wants me to sit next to her every time. She speaks for me because I can't speak Chinese. So those
yeah.
are instances that at the end of the day, when I had my PhD, I wanted more. When I was close to finishing my first PhD, I wanted a second PhD. And that was what took me to Hong Kong, right? And I wanted to go to the best university in the world, right? So that was
Yeah.
what took me to Hong Kong. I got that admission, I was there. So I had to make tough decisions, right? Until I came to Canada. So when I came to Canada, I was looking for jobs in NGOs and other places. And then Dr. Damlari came in and told me that, oh, there is an opening at the University of Alberta. You can do it. My research mainly focused on adverse childhood experiences. And he said, this program is about psychological trauma. And I was like, can I actually do it? He said, come on, go for it. So I sent in the application and I was invited for interview. And I was like, oh my God, I did about 5 rounds of interview before I got in. But what I want to bring out here is that motivation. Someone needs to tell you that you can do it, that you need to believe that you can do it. So I did that until I met somebody else again who told me that, why are you here? You can be a senior person in the government. You can apply. I was like, am I qualified? Then, you just have to believe you can do it until I applied and I am here today. So it's all about meeting the right people, having the right mindset, pushing. You need to be motivated. Yeah.
Wow, wow. Great experience and great story, Dr. Tosi. I'm remembering all the things that happened along the journey, and it's really sweet memories. Congratulations for all you have achieved. Right, you mentioned the place of mentorship. Really, mentorship cannot be overemphasized. Meeting the right people on the journey is really, really important. The next question will be going to Dr. Rosaline. I'd like to know about your PhD. So you told us how you had a master's in neuroscience, you came into nursing, and later on you went into your a PhD program. So I'd like to know, why did you decide to go for a PhD? And can you please walk us through your experience during your PhD program? Yeah.
So, yeah, great question. So, I wanted to do a PhD because I wanted to get back into research. And
Okay.
I believed at the time that the only way to really be heavily involved as a leading person in research was to get a PhD. And here in the UK, we have a government body called the NIHR, and that just stands for the National Institute for Health and Care Research. And it's a big governing body, and that governing body has all sorts of different fellowships and different levels that you can apply for that will give you funding to do your PhD.
Yeah.
And where I was at, the hospital that I was at, there was a leading researcher, nurse researcher, professor, speaking of standing on other people's shoulders,
Yeah.
Professor Greta Westwood. And so I talked to her about this dream of wanting to do a PhD and how to do it. And she, together with a cardiologist, a consultant cardiologist, senior doctor, worked with me to develop and actually build my own sort of independent PhD. So it wasn't like somebody had already applied for a grant and I applied for an existing role. We actually spent about a year putting together what we thought would be a PhD, and we proposed that, and then I had to apply for it, just like you had to apply for a job. Even though I was the one who wrote it, I still had to apply for it.
Yeah.
And I was successful in getting it, and it was classed as what was called a clinical doctoral research fellow. So that meant actually I was still doing my job 2 days a week in the hospital as a research nurse, but then I had 3 days a week to do my PhD. And I had the funding to do that for 4.5 years. So it's somewhere in between a full-time PhD that you're supposed to finish in 3 years, but not a part-time one that takes you 7 years. And again, because I had sort of like dreamed up this PhD, it was based on things that I was seeing in my clinical care. So I was working in a lot of cardiology research, and I noticed that people who had heart failure, compared to any other patient population that I'd worked with, they seemed to really struggle with understanding their symptoms and knowing how to react or take the right medications with their symptoms. Like there seemed to be this really missing piece there. So I wanted to better understand how somebody's symptoms might actually be interacting with their ability to do their self-care, so take their medications, make lifestyle changes. So we built a pretty big PhD. And like Dr. Tosin was saying, I did it all by publication. So I had to write a full thesis, so 70,000 words, plus I had 5 papers that were published throughout the course of my PhD.
Wow, that's a lot.
It was a lot. I wouldn't recommend doing it quite that big. 3 is plenty. Don't try and do more than 3.
Wow. Wow. It makes sense actually, because you really wanted to be that researcher. You wanted a PhD, and then you went all out. You know,
I went all out.
writing 5 papers. Wow, I can imagine the stress and how you were able to navigate. So another question I want to follow up on that is about transiting from the bedside as a research nurse to becoming that researcher doing a PhD. So I know there are quite a number of nurses in the UK who are listening to us, and there are many that will still watch this podcast later and would like to know, I'm a nurse in the UK and I'm interested in getting into a PhD program. What advice would you be offering such nurses?
Good question. So I really believe that actually nurses are already doing more research than they fully understand. And I think they have a misconception around what is research. So like anytime you do any sort of an audit, anytime you do like a service evaluation, anytime even like you look at your patient and you look at all of the different information that the person's giving you, whether that's their words or their data through their observations, you're actually taking that, making an interpretation on it, and then making a plan. And I think regardless of where you are in the world, if this is a pathway that you want to do, then the first step is find out in your hospital who's playing the game. So find out if there's anybody who is actually who's doing some research, and it doesn't matter if they're a nurse or a doctor or a radiologist or whoever. Find somebody who's doing research in your hospital, because they're going to be your best door to knock on that can then say, okay, whether you're in Norway or China or whatever, these are the steps that you need to follow. And that's the important thing to do, because they will then be able to help you, because every place, and potentially even every month, depending on where you're going, your opportunities will be different. So here in the UK, we've got several different programs that you can apply for, even like pre-masters. So you can
Okay.
apply for like research internships, and that will buy you like 1 day a week of your salary to work with a senior researcher, either in a university or in the hospital, or sometimes a combination, to do some sort of a small project, just kind of get your head wrapped around what does research look like. And
Mm.
then if that goes well, then depending on whether or not you already need a master's or not, there's loads of funding streams out there. So anybody who's interested in research, I'd say find out in your country, in your healthcare and university system, who's doing research, what are the funding opportunities out there for you. So is it a governmental body like the NIH in America, or in not in the UK, in America that it's the NIH,
Yes.
and there's loads of different ones. But also look, like if you already have really advanced skills, say in an emergency department or in mental health or in midwifery, look to charities as well. So local charities or national charities often have funded PhDs and master's programs that you can kind of hook up with.
Yeah.
But regardless of how you get it funded,
Mm.
you need really, really strong and caring people around you, because it isn't easy.
Yeah.
It's a hard pathway. And even when you have the best people around you, it can still be really hard. And without those mentors, without those supervisors, without that support network around you, it doesn't matter if you get the funding or not. It'll make it 100 times better if you have like a cool group of people around you.
Wow. Wow. Thank you so much, Dr. Rosalind, for that. You've taken us through, walked us through what it takes, to move from that clinical side, bedside role into a researcher doing a PhD program. Thank you so much for that. You mentioned quite a number of things. I'd like to take Dr. Tosin on. You mentioned something about collaboration, interdisciplinary collaboration, and Dr. Tosin also mentioned that earlier on when he was speaking about how that an engineer was able to, spur him in some ways, motivate him in some ways into research. And I know some of us are wondering that Dr. Tosin is not a nurse, and he did a postdoc in the Faculty of Nursing at University of Alberta. So that shows us the place of interdisciplinary collaboration. There are various research studies that we might be doing, and then it's important to collaborate with people. So that stood out for me from Dr. Rosalind's point, and I'd like to take Dr. Tosin on that. Can you tell us what your experience has been doing interdisciplinary research, working with different people? How do you think a researcher who is interested in going that route, what are the things that we need to do if we are going to be successful in working with people from various professions?
Yeah, I would like to start by saying that research is not a one size fit all. And this is what most people don't understand. There is different beats and different parts to research.
Yeah.
We have research conceptualization, we have methodology, we have data analysis, we have manuscript writing, for example. And, research is what brings every discipline together, whether
Yeah.
you are economist, whether you are in nursing, whether you are a sociologist like me, whether you are a medical doctor, you have to do research. So in terms of collaboration and interdisciplinary, everybody needs, each other. For
Yeah.
example, I have strong theoretical foundation, for
Yeah.
example, and I
Oh,
know nursing now, we're talking about intersectionality. We are
yeah.
talking about racial issues. We're talking about people, individuals who are, in the hospitals. They have social and human factors in them. So you want to bring people in who that they have a certain level of skills that you can harness.
Yeah.
Because you are, as a person, as a researcher, you are not an island. So I would like to give you an example. When I mentioned that an engineer kind of spurred me into research, this person has a city level data. And
Okay.
he said, "Oh, Tosin, can you look at this data for me? I need basic descriptive statistics." You know,
Okay.
I was like, "Oh my God, simple." And I just gave him the descriptive statistics, and he was like, "Thank you. I have to put you in this paper." I was like, "No, I don't want to." But he eventually put my name in that paper. So you see, as an engineer, they need descriptive level statistics, correlation analysis, for example. So
Yeah.
when I went to University of Alberta Faculty of Nursing to conduct research about psychological trauma of individuals who are living in long-term care facilities, you
Okay.
know. And so in these long-term care facilities, you have registered nurses, you have LPN, you have psychologists as well. They are all there. So as a sociologist, what I took into that setting was my, participant observation skill, for example, ethnographic skill, went into that setting to understand the workings of, let me just use a typical example of the hospital, for example. How does it work? How do people move together? How do they connect? So when you observe, you take notes, then
Mm.
you begin to gather data at that point. You begin to see social problems. So you
Yeah.
see, as a nurse, you are in the midst of data. As a
Yeah.
sociologist, the way a sociologist will see that data will be different from how a nurse will see that data. But
Def-
imagine if you bring a sociologist and a nurse together to now conceptualize a study, it's going to
Yeah.
come out with a powerful output. So this
Yeah.
is one of the strengths of understanding that you need collaboration from someone in public health, for example. An epidemiologist, for example, can integrate well into your research. So I was so open-minded when I started to do my research. Most of the people that I collaborated with were from public health, who were more interested in cancer. I've done some amazing studies on cancer. I've done some studies on Ebola, for example. But as I said before, they value my input. So there was a study that I did that is having massive citation right now. It was
Okay.
about cancer control, for example. And I picked that data to validate how the knowledge base was disseminated into that paper, for
Mm.
example. And when you look at me, you will see Department of Sociology, and every other person in that project were from public health and, for example, like that. So do not close the door on interdisciplinary research or collaboration. Do not limit yourself within the faculty of nursing that you are in or the hospital that you are in. Maybe you have somebody in agriculture who is very vast in terms of data analysis, for example. You have critical thinkers who are, in other discipline as well. So my point is, don't lock yourself in a box. Don't
Mm.
shut yourself out. Don't shut people out. When you do that, I used to tell people, oh, you have ideas. Great. Wherever you plan to get to, you're going to get there, but it's going to take forever. It's going to be so slow. But when
Mm.
you go with people with you can achieve so much more in a short time. There was a period in 2022 that we published almost 15 papers. And I was asking myself, how did I do it? At the end of the day, I had just 3 first authorship, right? So you see, I try to bring people in. When I have ideas, I look at the strength of people as well. And we are able to create magic. So collaboration, interdisciplinary research is great. Psychological trauma, for example, cut across everybody. In
Various
the
programs.
people deal with psychological trauma.
Wow.
Personal, we deal with psychological trauma. So this is the
Wow.
lens that we should begin to look at research and say
Mm.
that, okay, I am open-minded. I am willing to go to different faculties to see how they're doing things and how I can integrate that into what I am doing. So
Awesome.
that's it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Akintunde, for that. That's really, really, really profound. And as you are speaking, I remember that my mentor, Professor Priska Adejumo, has a master's in sociology. She's a nurse. She has 2 masters, 2 PhD, 1 master in nursing, 1 master in sociology, and 1 master PhD in nursing and PhD in sociology. And she also does a lot of research that brings people in. And something I would also like to chime in at this point is that if we're also seeking to get grants, we need to see how we can bring different professions on board so they can bring in their different lenses to the research, so that the funders will see that, oh, okay, this research is a very rich one, various lenses are coming in, and then the outcome is really going to be great. And I also remember during my PhD, that was my experience too, because my PhD was about developing a mobile application to provide psychoeducational support for Nigerian women with breast cancer receiving chemotherapy. So we needed the input of nurses, of oncologists, we needed the input of psychologists, and we all came together to develop the intervention. So thank you so much for highlighting that. So at this point, we'd like to also receive questions from our audience. If you're on Facebook, if you're on YouTube, any question that you have about your research journey, how to move into the research role and other things like that, please feel free to ask, and we are going to be doing justice to that. Okay, a question was coming in. Someone said that they could not get the clarification between a nurse researcher and a research nurse. Dr. Rosalind, do you want to quickly?
Yeah, so I've been trying to follow the live stream as well. I'm like trying to multitask here.
Awesome.
Yeah, I've just put a link into the chat that everybody can look at that goes into it in more detail, but very, very briefly, just to like clear it up for you, Ella, is a research nurse is their job to make sure that any research study gets delivered. So it's about the data collection. It's about setting up the study, all of those sorts of things. So it's much more focused on that data collection, intervention to delivery, and nothing else that's part of research. Where a nurse researcher does the whole spectrum. So from idea. So if you're on the ward and you're like, why are we still doing this way? Or my patients don't seem to match what I learned in nursing school. I want to know more. So taking that germ of an idea and then developing a research study, doing the research study, and then writing about it at the end.
Oh, okay, great. That's a beautiful clarification. Thank you so much for that. So the next question still goes to you, Dr. Rosalind. I'd like to know, when you are speaking about your PhD journey, you mentioned how challenging it was. And I've met many people tell me that, oh, they are not sure if PhD is for them. It's looking so difficult, looking so challenging, and there are a lot of challenges that they need to surmount along the journey. So I'd like you to please tell us, what are some of the challenges that nurse researchers face today? And what do you think are the main barriers that prevent many nurses from even entering research in the first place? And how can they surmount these challenges? Thank you.
Great question. So 100% getting your PhD and doing your PhD is hard, but that really doesn't change if you're a nurse. All PhDs are hard. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You have to have a bit of stamina, a bit of perseverance, a bit of passion to get you through. But I think so I was just looking at this the other day. Nursing, all healthcare professions, other than medical doctors, are poorly represented when it comes to people, like I said, who are that researcher. So you have this idea and you've designed a study and you conduct the study. And I think out of all of the other healthcare professions, so like physios, OTs, even midwives, I think nurses is one of the categories of healthcare professions that actually has the lowest level of nurses, even once they finish a PhD, who are actually in a role that allows them to use a PhD. And I think that's one of the biggest and hardest barriers as a nurse to doing a PhD and to keeping that research into your career. And I think there's, depending on the country that you're at, there's varying degrees of pushing from like very high up levels, like in senior nursing leadership within a country, as well as within governments. They've actually, I just saw this not that long ago. So on LinkedIn, I saw this and I was like, wow, that was really, really powerful. So Microsoft, so big software company, they came out publicly and declared that they are making a conscious change in strategy around the design delivery of research around any of their healthcare products that they're trying to make. So digital health technologies.
Yeah.
And previously they'd been focusing on having like medical doctors as advisors and researchers. And they actually came out and publicly said that they're shifting to nurses because they find nurses do it better.
Yeah. Yes, we
right?
do. We
So
do.
because they do, I mean, a little bit biased here, but there is a shift that's happening out there, but that shift doesn't guarantee a job at the end. And so again, like I think if you're going to do research and you want research to be your primary employment stream, you need to have that passion, like Dr. Tozen was talking about. You need to have that drive. You need to have that ambition in order to be able to make sure that all of that effort in your PhD doesn't just become a degree that you did once, that you actually embed it into your career. And in England, I'll find it and I'll put it in the chat again as well. The chief nurse's office, they actually got together and they co-designed and wrote a how-to document and how to implement embedding research into your career as a nurse. And that's jammed full of lots of really practical advice. But I think the biggest thing we can all do, like regardless of whether you have a PhD or not, I think nurses really need to like do exactly what you've done with this, Donna, is like support each other, like push each other's careers forward, like change the branding around nursing to not just be what it's been like historically, to be the movers and shakers, the people who are making change happen in our healthcare.
Wow. Thank you so much. That's really, really insightful. And I know our speakers, our participants, they will have some things to take from that. Okay. Another question coming in that I'd like Dr. Akintunde to take is around doing a PhD. Though I didn't know this conversation is going to go more into doing PhD and things like that. I thought it's going to be more of just research, but since it's moving that direction, we better go with that flow. So can you please walk us through what are the advices that you think someone doing a PhD needs to be taking cognizance of? For example, when I was doing my PhD, there are many things I found along the line that I did not anticipate. And I just found it as I moved on. There was little guidance. I knew little about what I should be expecting doing a PhD. And you are here, you have gotten a PhD, and then people are here also listening to you, and they might be interested in going into one. What are the things that some piece of advice you are going to give your younger self if you are to start a PhD today? Things you wish you knew before entering a PhD program.
Thank you, Dr. Damilare. You know, PhD is long and boring. So, you know, having that
boring,
long and boring. So, you know, when you're bored, you know what you need to do? Find things to make yourself happy, right, in the process. You know, it's a
Mm.
long journey, and then you need to be ready to last the journey. That is
Okay.
one of the first mindsets you must have. So if you want to go into a PhD, don't wait until you have all the clarity you need. But once you have a tiny little bit of idea and you know that you can survive the long journey, you can survive the burden, go into it.
Okay.
Because there's so many opportunities that you can harness once you have your PhD. But
Okay.
first, you must, devise a strategy for survival.
Okay.
And when you find the right school, the right mentorship, because also I would like to tell you that the university you choose to do your PhD is very important. The
Mm.
person that is going to supervise you is very important. So the
Yeah.
lab and the person that will supervise your PhD can either promote your success or set you back. I have had people who said that they spent like 9 years, 7 years in PhD just because they were not permitted to move forward in their research. So
Mm.
when you choose the right university and then you choose the right supervisor, you know that you have been set up on the path of success. Then you need to look inward as well. Don't wait until you have that perfect manuscript. Don't delay until you have that perfect data. So you need to
Mm.
start to do it little by little. That's why I said it is so long.
Okay.
You might have to refine your research questions multiple times, but
Yeah.
just have those research questions. Know that, believe in your heart that you can do the PhD. And then we need to talk about the skills that you must learn, you must develop along the line. So you might go into a PhD without having the skill. Be
Mm.
ready to develop the skill when you enter into the PhD. You
Very
might not
important.
know how to analyze qualitative data. You might
Yeah.
not know how to analyze big quantitative data, but
Mm.
be ready to evolve. That's why I said it is, if PhD is short, you know that you do not have the room to evolve as a person. But it is so long that you have multiple opportunity to continue to shape who you want to be as a researcher. I would like
Yeah.
to give you a personal example. So you see, when I started my PhD, I thought I was going to go into core child health, like I want to measure fever, cough, malaria in children, and how mothers' behavior impact that. But at the end
Okay.
of the day, I found out that my passion was not there. So when I was in my moment of seeking clarity in terms of what I was going to do, in fact, that was what I presented my proposal for my PhD.
Okay.
That was the topic. But at the end of the day, when I found that clarity, I changed my final research along the line. So you see, you have opportunity to continue to evolve. So then you also need to develop skills along the line. One
Okay.
example that readily comes to mind was when I wrote my first paper. I started collaboration, for instance. And then we wrote this paper. I had a friend who did a data analysis. I wrote the body of the paper. And then we submitted it. And then feedback came from the reviewers. And I could not hear back from my friend for about 3 months. And we need to revise the data analysis, for example. But I had no idea how he did the coding, how he came to the point of the result of the data. So you
Okay.
see, I had to learn how to conduct data analysis at the level of PhD. So
Mm.
with PhD, you have the room to learn so many skills.
Yeah.
So when you want to go into PhD, be open-minded.
Very important.
Ready. Be ready for, it's more like push and shove. Your supervisor is going to give you some deadly feedback.
Yeah.
There was a time I got feedback from my supervisor and I felt sick afterwards.
No
Days.
way.
So we're talking about resilience,
Yeah.
adaptation within the process. That's why I said it is boring, it is hard. So you
Yeah.
need resources along the line. You need family, you need friends. Think
Mm.
about what can help you navigate the process.
Yeah.
Imagine if you have to do PhD for 5 years. You need to
Mm.
do coursework. You need to do research. You need to go to the field, collect data, write manuscripts. especially if you have to publish 5 papers like Dr. Rosalind.
Yeah.
And your supervisor says that you are not graduating until you have 5 papers, and that's
Mm,
it. You cannot negotiate, you cannot bargain it. If that is what your supervisor wants, that's it. So think about it. You're stuck in that scenario. You are in PhD, and you already bragged to your family that you're doing PhD. After 1 year or 2 years, they are expecting a doctor to emerge, and then you are stuck in publishing 5 papers. So you see, you need multiple skills to get 5 papers.
mm,
It's
yeah,
not just one skill set that you need. You need to
mm,
know how to conceptualize. You need to know how to write manuscript. You need to know
yeah,
how to conduct literature review. You
yeah,
need to know how to present your result with clarity. You need
yeah.
to know your audience. So you see, why are you conducting the research? That's why I said from the beginning, you might not have the best ideas when you want to go into it, but believe it, it grows when you are in it, and then you're evolving in the process. So PhD is that fertile ground where the giant within you, that child, that person they said you will be when you are a small child, that is when that person emerge. So you have to pay the price, learn new skills, be ready for the long haul. So PhD is very possible. It is interesting. It's sharpening you. It makes you become a better person. It prunes you to be what you will be for the next 30, 40, 50 years of your life.
Wow, this is really insightful, really insightful. As you are speaking, I was just reflecting on my PhD journey, and then I can categorically say I did not, I do not regret, doing a PhD a single day. If we go back in time, I would still do a PhD again and again. Recently I was brought on a project. We mentioned interdisciplinary collaboration, and then the project was about conducting a health and risk vulnerability assessment, in a community, in a territory in Canada. And then I told the person that I've not done something like this before, it's not in my research area. And he said something that a PhD is like an AK-47. I tell you that you cannot say that as someone holding AK-47, you are not trained to bring down a lion. You are not trained to bring down elephants. You can use an AK-47 to bring down, to hunt down anything. And that was a great motivation for me, right? And then very important point you have mentioned. We are in the third week of this boot camp, and during the first week, one important point one of our speakers mentioned is about the need to design our careers. And I'm a big fan of that. That from day one of starting a PhD program, you need to decide where you are going to go after that PhD. You need to decide what is the next role I'll be entering after that PhD. And then you need to understand what are the things needed to move from the current stage that you are to that final stage. And then you go all out to get the skills. Thank you so much, Dr. Tosin, for highlighting that. We'll be moving on to the next question, and that question is for Dr. Rosalind. And so let's talk about how I met Dr. Rosalind again. It was through it was through a podcast, Researcher Revealed, and that podcast is amazing. Really, really, really amazing. And I like our viewers, people watching us and who are going to watch this podcast. So please go ahead and subscribe to that YouTube channel if you are a nurse and you want to go into research. One important thing about that podcast is that it reveals, the people behind the research. And I find that very, very interesting. We have been seeing the names publishing on Google Scholar on different platforms, and we need to know who are these people that are actually doing this research. And then we met online, and she reached out to me that she would like me to feature on that podcast in 2024, and I was part of it, and it was a very, very beautiful experience. Thank you again for bringing me on board on that podcast. I've had many people talk about it. Many people have referred to that podcast over and over again. So we want to hear from you about that platform, Researcher Revealed. What inspired you to start this? I know many researchers, we are very busy in the labs conducting research. The last thing we want to do is start anything. We see any other thing, big distraction. So what inspired you to start this platform? And will you tell us more about how it has helped, build
Yeah.
visibility and other things like that? Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Before I tell that story, I just want to say, like, so far we've been talking a lot about how hard PhDs are and how hard research is, and it's true, but like you were saying, Dami, it's also the best thing. And like, if you want to be a nurse of impact, then
Yeah.
research is where it's at, because when you're nursing, you can help that one patient or that patient's family, or if you have 5 patients on a shift or 20 patients on a shift,
Yeah.
that's the extent of your reach. Where when you're doing research, your extent becomes exponential. And so I think, yes, it's hard, but good things often are hard.
Yeah.
And that actually links me to why I started the Researcher Revealed podcast, because when I was doing my PhD, I read all the time. I love reading and I love listening to podcasts. And
Okay.
I found myself listening to lots of entrepreneurial podcasts that did similar to like what Researcher Revealed does, where they would invite a business person on and say, hey, tell me about your business. How did you get to achieve X, Y, or Z? Or an author, how did you write this book? Why did you write this book? But when I looked around on podcasting platforms, like, there is like the obvious, like Huberman's Lab. So it's an American one, and he's a biologist, something like that. And he talks about the type of science he does, and like general science around like humans and how to be at your optimum performance. But when I was talking about like health research, it was either like that, so like micro level, like physiology style stuff,
Yeah.
or it was medical research, so research from physicians. And there's so much more research out there, and some of that research just isn't getting spotlighted. And people only think of, like, when I would speak to patients as a research nurse, they would be like, oh, you want me to be a guinea pig? And I'm like, well, maybe not. Maybe that's not what research is about. There's more to research than just that perception.
Yeah.
And so I was finding, when I was going to conferences or meetings or webinars, I was having like these incredible conversations that were really inspiring with like researchers who were like maybe 20 years ahead of me, maybe 30 years ahead of me, maybe like 2 years behind me. But like finding out about who they were and why they were passionate about that research or that method or whatnot was so helpful to me. And I just thought, well, why isn't anybody doing this? And I think it's because it goes back to what I said, like these lesser known, these underrepresented pockets of research, they don't get a spotlight shone on them. And so I was like, well, I might as well start. I don't have a very, like, my spotlight's only a flashlight, but it's better than sitting in the dark. And
Yeah.
so I started it to just basically try and give a platform to people like you, people like me, other people I've met, to share more about their research. And I had no clue what I was doing. I still don't. But it's been an incredible journey. Like, it's
Awesome.
so fascinating. I get to meet people that I would have never reached out to before. I
Yes.
get to have really interesting conversations, friendships,
Mm.
collaborations, all sorts of things have come from it that I wasn't expecting. Like, I know how to video edit now. I know, like there's all sorts of hidden, like it's similar to what Dr. Tozen was saying about a PhD.
Yeah.
Is, you start with this idea and you have to be open and you have to be willing to learn, and like that becomes your superpower. And it
Mm,
doesn't matter then whether or not you've ever done research in kidney disease, you know how to research. And it's been
yeah.
similar with the podcast. Like, I know how to ask questions, I know how
Yes.
to listen, and everything else you can learn in the background. Like, YouTube is a great place, the internet is a great place to learn.
Definitely.
And
Definitely.
it's really fun to see how, even though I only have like a little flashlight, like it's reaching people. Like, I'm now starting to get health researchers from all over the world reaching out to me and asking to be guests, and I'm like, have you even heard of me?
Wow. 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 Awesome. Wow, great points there. And one major thing I'm taking away from
Mhm.
this point you raised is we must be ready to build new skills,
Yes.
right? Yeah, you
Yes.
mentioned that we are not sure about your video editing skills and a couple of things like that, but that did not deter you from
No.
going into starting a podcast. And I can still tie that to a point Dr. Tosi mentioned earlier when he was talking about, getting new skills during your PhD. So if you are a
Exactly.
nurse listening to us, I would like to encourage you, don't let the skills that you think you do not have prevent you from getting to the next level you are meant to be. Go ahead and get those skills. So I'll be moving on to the next question, bringing Dr. Tosin on board. And one important thing that drew me to Dr. Tosin when we met is about his skills in data analysis. So if you look at the career bootcamp that Nursiscope has designed, you are going to see that we have a track for research, data analysis, and transition into the academia. Dr. Rosali mentioned something that we don't have many nurses who are really at the forefront of research in their various roles. And even it's even worse when we think about data analysis. If we do not have many nurses taking a lot of bold step as far as research is concerned, then when talking about data analysis, it's even worse. It's something that is I'm so passionate about. I want to see nurses build skills in data analysis. And that's my experience actually. I did my master's at the Faculty of Nursing, University of Ibadan, and I conducted a mixed method study. That was my first experience laying my hands on data and trying to analyze. And when I got to Hong Kong for my PhD, in fact, it was the culture of that university that you must analyze your data by yourself. You know that, Dr. Akintunde, you are there too. You need to be able to analyze. Of course, we have someone at the faculty that guides us. If you have anything to ask, you can always ask, but they expect you to take the lead as far as building data analysis skills is concerned. And that's why at Nursiscope we have been able to create a kind of hub. We call it a data analysis hub. And I've been talking to Dr. Tosin for like 3, 4, 5 months about this, that we need to really come together and collaborate on this and be able to build nurses that are very skilled in the art of data analysis. So I want you to please walk us through your journey as far as data analysis is concerned. How did you get into it? Is it difficult? Can nurses build skills in data analysis? If I'm a nurse and I want to be trained in data analysis, what are the things I should be doing?
Yes, data analysis. I would like to say it is not difficult because we all have
Are you
different.
sure? Are you sure about that?
So I'm very intentional in my choice of word
Words,
because
okay.
I don't want to push people away.
Way, okay.
Yes, it is very important to have this mindset that it is not difficult. You know
Okay.
what makes it beautiful? What makes data analysis beautiful is that there are so many different tools. There are so many different methodologies that when you know how to use them, you can answer the same questions using this different methodologies, different
Okay.
tools. So I said it earlier that I had a challenge in revising a manuscript because a friend who did the original analysis, I could not reach him. I had no idea what it did to that data, and I was stuck.
Okay.
And then my wife told me that, why do you need someone to help you do your analysis?
Okay.
So I had to sit down. So I said something about bachelors being like what sets you up. You might not have all this data analysis skills at the level of your BSc, but they have
Mm,
given you the foundational knowledge. So you will assume that you cannot do it. But as long as you set your mind to start and to learn, that is your starting point. See,
mm.
you have to pick it from where it is soft. So that is
Okay.
what you need to first have in your mind in terms of data analysis. Pick
Mm,
it where it is very soft. If you don't know how to do descriptive statistics like basic frequency distribution, z-test, t-test, or just correlation analysis, those are the
mm.
soft spots in data analysis that you can start from there.
Okay.
So even if you find it difficult to learn it by yourself, find
Mm.
that person who knows it within your circle.
Okay.
Be humble. So I'll give you an instance. When I was struggling to learn maths, because mathematics used to be one of my best subjects when I was in high school. How I
Okay.
learned mathematics, because you cannot eliminate mathematics from data analysis. I
Mm,
had somebody come over. I became friends with this person.
mm,
What that guy needed was what I provided. He
mm,
loved me as a brother, and he sat me down and he started to show me what mathematics was all about. So that
mm.
was the same approach that I use with my data analysis. I started to
Awesome.
talk to people. For example, you pick a manuscript and you see that this person is using like multi-level modeling, and you look
Mm,
at the manuscript. You go on YouTube. How do you conduct a multi-level modeling? You might
mm,
watch YouTube and it became maybe still confusing. At the end of
mm.
the day, find somebody in your research network. See, networking is very important. There is a there's a community called research. So I would like to use that word. It's called research community.
Mm,
Within research community, there are people with crazy mad skills. I'm sorry for using that word, but it is true because right now I am still learning. Despite the
mm,
fact that I have done so much in terms of analysis, when I started my postdoc, one of the first things my professor told me was, "Oh, there's this professor. He wrote about 3 textbooks on how to do structural equation modeling. His name is Professor Haydock." She said, "Go and meet with him."
Yeah.
And
mm.
he gave me 2 textbooks. When I took those 2 textbooks from him, I was like, oh my God, how do I learn 2 textbooks on structural equation modeling? Meanwhile, I had conducted studies on structural equation modeling. And this
Mm.
professor said, dude, you still have a lot to learn on structural equation modeling. So you see, as I said before, start from where it is soft. Pick it up from there. Pick up manuscripts. What is this methodology they used? What kind of analysis did they use? And then have the desire to, replicate that analysis into your own paper. You don't want
Mm.
somebody to pick your manuscript and say that you are only using one style of analysis. You want to be
Analysis.
diverse in terms of your analysis because you have multiple questions, different questions that you want to answer. So you see, but for some of us that were starting from the beginning, start from where it is soft.
Yeah.
Develop the love for data
Yeah.
and how you want to analyze your data. Once you love it, it is the massive love affair. Once you love it, it's not ending. So you pick
Mm.
it from one point to the next point, and you begin to grow, and you begin to grow, and you begin to grow. So that's my idea on how to integrate or embed yourself in data analysis.
Beautiful, brilliant. Thanks so much for highlighting that. And for people who have registered, for this boot camp, so we have 2 kinds of sessions. There are some sessions that we make open for everyone, just like this session, and we have some sessions that are there are closed door sessions for those who have registered. So if you have not registered, please try and register so that you can be part of those closed door sessions. We are going to be having Dr. Akin today taking us further in how to, learn and build data analysis skills. And you will really like to be part of that. And like I mentioned earlier, we also have this package for nurses who wants to build their capacity. We are going to be creating a community of nurses who are analyzing data, and we are going to be supporting ourselves like a community of practice. If you have a challenge, you can just reach out. Oh, I'm trying to analyze this data. This and this happened. What should I do? And you are going to have somebody responding to you on how to move. So please let's note that. I'm going now to Dr. Rosaline. There are some questions that are coming in for you, and there are two questions actually from Adetayo. I'm going to quickly go through them. Like Adetayo has like 3 questions for you in the chat box for you alone. So the first is Adetayo is asking, how did you get to specialize in your clinical research nurse role, and would you advise someone going into it newly to specialize first or work as a generic research nurse? I think we can start from there.
Yeah, so it's a great question. So I think the best way to answer your question is actually to ask you a question, and what do you want to do? Okay, so if you are really thinking like, I see myself going down and doing a PhD, I want to be embedded into research, or being one pathway, or a different pathway being I want to specialize as like an advanced nurse practitioner or a nurse prescriber, or run a ward, because that will really determine actually the best way for you to make that decision whether or not to specialize first or to work as a generic research nurse. Because if for example you really want to work in heart failure or kidney failure or fill in the blank or cancer, then it would be better for you to try and specialize to be a research nurse in that area, because then you'll learn both skills sort of simultaneously.
Yeah.
I would say for most people in most places, I would say to spend, and I did this myself, spend at least a year, if not longer, just being a nurse before you start to try and do research nursing. Because like I said, depending on the studies that you get assigned, it can be really advanced skills.
Yeah.
And so you need to understand how illness works, how patients work, how medicine works, to give you the confidence. As far as actually specializing within research, I didn't get a choice. So the jobs that I got here in the UK, we just got assigned a given pathology. So when I first started as a research nurse, I was in kidney transplant, and then I moved hospitals and moved jobs and ended up in cardiology. And I didn't really get that much of a choice in it. That's just where the jobs were. So it kind of depends on what your hospital is up to, but it also depends more on what you want.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. I know Aditya has gotten the clarity that she needs. So moving to the next question that she asked, she's asking, what are the things that you did that increased your chances of getting a clinical research role as an ICU nurse? She's really following your conversation.
I was going to say, she's paying attention.
Yeah.
So again, if we go back to the first question that you asked me, Dami, I kind of cheated because I'd already completed a master's and had done my own research study as part of my master's at the University of Toronto before I became a nurse. So when I was then working on an ITU ward, I was always looking out for opportunities. So when the research nurses would come around, I'd be like, ooh, do you guys need a hand? Do you need help? Like, what study are you doing? I'd ask questions, and it goes back to that like networking skill, like who in your hospital is doing research. How did they get the job? Is there like internships that you can do? Can you see if your manager will let you shadow a research team member for one of your shifts and just get a better idea of what they're doing? So, like, keep those eyes open, look for those opportunities, and I say this like it's a hard thing to do. Everybody talks about networking like it's some sort of like super secret superpower. In reality, all you have to do is reach out and say, hey, I'm interested in this. Like, don't be intimidated by somebody who might have their PhD, by anybody like that. Just reach out and say, hey, I'm interested in research. Can we have a chat? And if they're a researcher, they will be all over you like a rash.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much for that clarity. We are almost running out of time. We are going to be going into the next question from Oyinda Mola. And if we are not able to answer all your questions, don't worry. The bootcamp is still on. You can always drop them in the community, and then we are going to get back to you regarding those questions. So Oyinda Mola is asking a question that for me, maybe I should let Dr. Tosin answer that question. That for me, I have observed that it's a thing to analyze, and it's another thing to be able to interpret my results properly. How do I bridge that gap, Dr. Tosin?
So it is very simple. I know that now data analysis has shifted to where you use softwares to conduct your analysis. But you do know that before then, there are some theoretical foundation that that backs every analysis, right?
Very
But
important.
now we have become lazy in terms of how we approach data analysis. We only learn the tools, but then you need to go back to the theoretical foundation, because without that theoretical foundation of analysis, you may not understand how to interpret beta coefficient, for example.
Yeah.
Imagine you have to go back to your textbooks every time you see a negative beta or positive beta. How do
Mm,
you interpret that in terms of the questions you're asking?
mm,
So having that knowledge base of the theories that backs the choice of analysis that you're doing. If you want to do a linear regression, for example, if you want to integrate a moderation into that regression, if depending if it's even a correlation analysis to interpret negative and positive correlation, it is
mm,
very vital that you know the theory that backs a correlation. you
mm,
know they know what each signs represent. So it takes conscious effort. you
mm,
know you have to do it over and over again,
mm,
because you can read about the theory, you can know how to use the software, and then you have to get to the point of applying. So when you apply, it's okay for you to find it confusing the first time, second time, but you don't want to do research just one time and assume that you are an expert. You don't
yeah.
want to do data analysis just once and assume that you know it. See, if you do analysis today and you stop and you want to get back to it 6 months or a year later, it's more like you have to start afresh, because you might have forgotten all those things that you knew a year ago, right?
Mm,
So this is why you need to be consistent.
yeah.
You have to love to do it. You have to find opportunity to continue to analyze data,
Very
or
important.
else you have to go back to factory reset. you know so that is what data is all about. Just like you learn a skill, how to maybe sew, I don't know, any kind of skill, but you decide to take a break from it for a while.
Mm,
You see, this is going to impact how you do it later on if you take a break. So with research and with data analysis, you have to stay on it as much as you can.
don't
How do
stop.
you become an expert? If
Yeah.
you are a part-time data analyst, you only analyze data once a year. So
Mm,
definitely you are not going to be an expert of the subject. So
uh,
still be interested. Ask friends
okay.
to send their data to you.
Okay.
Let them send it, and then you
Okay.
develop interest.
Let me have this last question. Maybe second to the last for you, Dr. Akintude. She's asking that does AI help in data analysis? If it does, what are the limitations to its use, and how can I use it to complement what I do manually?
This is a very important question. So
Yeah.
AI is valuable.
Mm,
AI is important. When you get confused, go to your co-pilot.
mm.
Let your co-pilot help you. But it is the reality. But you
Mm,
still need to breathe into it. You need to breathe life into whatever you want to do because it's
mm,
just a machine, right?
yeah,
It has limitation. So you
mm,
can use it for clarity. We use AI to write codes.
mm,
Okay, so I started to use M plus. I was conducting some profile analysis, latent class analysis, for example. And
okay.
you have issues with your code. You can easily dump your code into Copilot. Ask questions like my code is giving me errors. Flag
Mm,
the error for me. It gets it to you. Recommend changes. So that's it. So it's iterative, for example. So
wow.
you cannot eliminate AI in data
Wow,
analysis.
awesome, awesome. Thank you so much for that clarity. And then the last question for Dr. Rosaline as we go. If you could leave every nurse and early researcher listening today with one piece of advice about building a meaningful research career, what would it be?
Whew. One piece of advice: be curious.
Hmm,
Everything starts with curiosity.
hmm,
Be curious, ask questions. Don't just accept somebody saying, oh, we've done it and we're practicing evidence-based research. Are we? Are
hmm,
we? Or are we just saying that we are? So
hmm,
ask those questions, and whether that's about like, how do I become a research nurse, or how can I do my analysis better? Like,
hmm,
curiosity becomes the foundation that will embed research into your career. And whether that's as simple as just making sure you have checked to see how strong the evidence is, or whether it's like being like Dr. Tosin and, being able to do really complicated data analysis. Research is a spectrum, and not everybody is going to be at the one end of it or the other. There's lots of places along there. And I think if you're going to be a careful, competent, caring nurse, you have to have research. If
yeah.
you don't have research, then you're not nursing.
Yeah, wow, that's really insightful. Thank you so much for that piece of advice. And then the same question goes to Dr. Tosin. If you could leave every nurse and early researcher listening today with that one piece of advice about building a meaningful research career, what would it be?
Yes, I would like to say be present, be
Mm,
there.
Yes.
There are conversations going on around you. People are doing things. If I want to say that like Dr. Dam Larry, he's doing things. You want to be involved. You just
mm,
don't want to hear about it, right?
mm,
Somebody publishes a paper around you. Be present. Get to know about it.
Yeah.
mm,
Don't be on the fence. Don't be
mm,
an observer.
mm.
Be active. You have to
Oh,
active role,
Yeah,
participate,
yeah.
get involved, take
Mm.
take roles, volunteer, tell them I can write introduction even if you can't. Okay, I'll tell you one example that came to mind.
yeah,
I
sure.
recall
Okay.
I was doing my master's, a professor I approached, she was teaching us research methods. And I said, oh, I want to publish papers. I want to be like you. She said, okay, go and conduct literature review. And
Mm.
I finished conducting that literature review, and she said, Tosin, I expected this, but this is where you are. And I was
Oh.
like, oh my God. So that was a challenge. I felt so,
Mm,
let somebody flag your limitations to you,
Yeah.
be ready to improve. If somebody says, I'm still on the floor in terms of literature review, oh my God, that means I have so much to do. So you
mm.
see, that's it. Be present,
Yeah.
Yeah.
be curious,
Wow.
just like Dr. Rosalind said.
Wow, wow. Thank you so much, Dr. Tosin. We are coming to the end of this session. I would like to really appreciate you, Dr. Rosaline, Dr. Tosin, for doing great justice to this session. We've learned a lot. It's really been insightful. I'd like our participants to say thank you to our speakers, our esteemed speakers, for really, bringing a lot of useful information to us. I know many of our participants are going to make judicious use of everything that they have learned today. The questions are still coming in, but we are come to the end of the session, sadly. But don't worry, you can still ask your questions in the community, and we are going to be very happy to answer them. Right? People are thanking you and saying that was an explosive session. Thank you, Dr. Tosin. Thank you, Dr. Akintunde. Yeah, this is really insightful. A lot of wonderful remarks coming in from our esteemed participant. Thank you so much for doing this. I hope if we call upon you the next time, you are going to answer us, and we are still looking forward to your input, to your mentorship, even at Nursiscope. Thank you so much for being part of this conversation. And with that, we are coming to the end of the Nursiscope Career Bootcamp 1.0 general live session for this weekend. We would like to hear what you have learned today. I've been seeing very beautiful remarks on social media, on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on Instagram. Please, let's go ahead and let's, talk about what we are learning and using our hashtag my Nursiscope experience. Let's use that hashtag my Nursiscope experience to be able to see what we are learning. Many people out there, they want to hear what you are learning. And if you are here, you have not registered, you are missing a lot. I don't need to tell you actually that you are missing a lot, because many of these things, this is just a general session. We are going to be going into the granular details, whereby we are going to be looking into how to analyze data. Dr. Tosin will be coming next week to speak to us on some other issues. He's going to be taking us during this boot camp on data analysis. He's going to be taking us on how to really write a manuscript. You don't want to miss that session. Last week, I took a breakout session on research foundations in nursing. I'm still going to be speaking about grantsmanship. These sessions are not going to be broadcasted on YouTube. They are breakout sessions whereby we're going to be sharing PowerPoints, talking, and doing a lot of things. And we are not only having research as our track, we have some other tracks. We have nurses that are diverse, in being interested in many things. So we have a track on AI and tech in nursing. We have mentioned that. So if you're interested in AI and tech in nursing, please join us. We have a track on entrepreneurship in nursing. If you're also interested, please join us, and we like to hear from you. Quite a number of tracks that we have in this boot camp, and you don't want to miss them. Until next weekend, when we are going to be meeting for the general live session and the breakout session. My name is Oluwadamilare Akingbade, the CEO and founder of Nursiscope. See you everyone next week. Bye. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, everyone.